I'll be this meeting moderator. Welcome everybody to the Director's Zoom meeting. Before we start, I'd like to provide just a couple of reminders. We're going to try and have folks keep their audio and video muted at this time so we have as little background noise as possible. We're also asking people to close their videos so we don't run into distortion problems with sound and video with a lot of folks on. The general format we'll be following is pretty straightforward. We'll have an initial message from our director, Jim Douglas. He's going to then answer some of the frequently asked questions that we've already had submitted. And then we'll go to live questions, and there's 3 ways to ask those. The first is if you have a question, you're participating by Zoom video conference, you can raise your hand and I will call on you. I may need some help in terms of getting the video and audio unmuted because we thought I could control that and initially I couldn't. Also, if you're on Zoom, you can ask your question in the chat box within Zoom. If you provide your name that way, then I can call on you to turn on your video and audio and ask your question. And if you're calling in via phone, you can text a question to 402-429-8671. That's on your screen. You might want to write it down. Please include your name and division. Those will go to Christy Firestone, who will send those to me via the chat box in Zoom. Then we can call on you by name, and hopefully you can ask your question live. If for some reason you have a question and you would prefer not to ask it directly, but you want me to ask the question to the director, we can do that via chat box or through the text. Just make sure you let us know your name and what division you're in. When we wrap up, we'll close the meeting. I'm kind of hoping if we have time, we might try to have everybody open up their video just so we can try to see as many of you as possible, although we might break Zoom in the process. We have scheduled an hour for this meeting. We know all of your time is valuable, and we appreciate all of you participating in this meeting.
Thank you, Tim. And I'd like to first welcome everybody that's participating today to this Zoom meeting. It's probably putting too much emphasis on it to say it's a historic event, but it's certainly a new kind of event for the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. So thank you for taking time today, and all of you that are on today are part of our first large Zoom meeting of the week. So you're going to help us work out the bugs and the protocol that we need to do this kind of thing. I want to thank all of you for everything that you're doing in light of the current health situation. I want you to know that we understand that this causes a lot of different kinds of issues for you, not only in your work life, but perhaps your personal life as well. And we want to be here to support you in any way we can. One of the messages that I give to all of our new employees when I meet with them is that we want you to be heard. And that means a lot of different things. In other words, if you have an issue, we want to hear you. If you have a better idea, we want to hear you. If you have an idea of how we can help you succeed, we want to hear you. So today is one of those we want you to be heard days for everyone that's on the call. So as we move forward and I make a few opening comments and we get into interchange and questions, make sure you're not bashful about asking questions, no matter what they might be like. Also, I want you to know that we've had several, I've participated in several Zoom meetings in the last couple of weeks, but we haven't had one with this many participants on it, so it causes its own issues, as Tim alluded to. But one of the things that we found out in meeting via Zoom, and I've met with on some other platforms as well with the Department of Interior folks who use a different platform, we found out that a lot of things can be done fairly efficiently through this kind of communication. And that's one of the things that we're finding as we try to react in a positive way to the current health situation, is that you know, the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission is a pretty adaptive group of people and also innovative. All of you are finding ways to serve the public, as we always have, in tremendously successful ways, even under current conditions. But I know you also have a lot of questions about the future. And it's hard because, you know, man isn't very good at predicting things, but when he does the best is when he pays attention to the best information available and also is adaptive as events happen. So that's what we have to do. And you're doing a good job. I want to thank all of you. We really, in many ways, haven't skipped a beat in what we're doing in service to the public. You know, in those things that necessitate interaction with people, close interaction, we've had to adapt, but we've done things like our education division has developed all kinds of educational programming that's available digitally to the public. We've done a lot of our contacting of landowners and regarding CRP sign up remotely, in other cases with social distancing. And one of the things that we've kept in mind this whole time, and something that we're going to have to keep in mind as we move forward throughout the whole summer, is that the way that we do things is going to be partially and largely influenced by still maintaining social distancing. So, you know, through the end of May, you know, there's a lot of governor's executive orders that will still be in effect. He's starting to make some new orders that affect how things transpire. And the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, in all of its planning and all of its decision making and collaboration up to this point, is remaining consistent with the governor's health directives, the regional health directors' directives, CDC suggestions, and so on and so forth. So we're remaining consistent with those, but we're also being adaptive to our needs and the public's needs. I want to reemphasize that as we move forward throughout the summer, we're going to have to be innovative in how we deliver our services, and we need to look for the silver linings in our current situation. You know, how have we learned about things that will increase our organizational effectiveness as we move forward? A couple of examples in that regard. You know, we had created sort of a COVID-19 reaction plan to begin with, and it covered certain aspects of what we were going to do immediately, how we're going to change some business practices immediately. But since that time, we've expanded our planning in a lot of ways. We've developed a very comprehensive continuation of services plan for not only pandemic situations, but other national emergencies and so on. It's been a great collaborative effort that's been done mostly via Zoom and telephone calls and other exchanges. So that's one of the products that have come out of this situation. We're currently developing a return to work plan and protocols, if you will. We have many people working from home. We've discovered that a lot of people and a lot of our functions work pretty well with people working from home, even some of those that we hadn't thought of before. So, but as we return more people to maybe their office spaces and so on, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and we're working on those plans as well. There's actually a seminar today, put on later today by Harvard University, about returning to work protocols that many of us are going to watch and help direct some of our planning efforts as we move forward. So I want to thank all of you for being resourceful, for being innovative. I want to empathize with you that have had difficulties associated with the current situation, and I look forward to our discussions as we move forward this morning. So with that, I would turn it back over to Tim as our moderator.
Thanks, Jim. I think the first thing we're going to do is go through some of the frequently asked questions that were submitted initially. I don't know how you want to go through those, Jim. Do you want me to try to ask those, or do you just want to read them and provide the answers?
Tim, why don't you, these questions were derived from questions that people sent in, and they were sort of consolidated, if you will. A lot of the questions that people have are the same questions, so we developed the frequently asked list. That's not the only questions that we'll address today or the only discussion we'll have, but I think, Tim, it would be best if you just want to start at the top of that list and read the question, and I'll provide the answer and ask if anybody wants to follow up on that question.
All right, that sounds good. First question, is there a tentative date for when we can return to the office?
We don't have a specific tentative date. As I mentioned in my introductory remarks, we're developing protocols for what we're calling return to work. It's really sort of returning to office space, probably more appropriate, because no one has stopped working throughout this whole situation. But part of that is discussing protective measures that would be part of our protocol in returning to offices and so on. So there's many things we're discussing. We're personal protective equipment, spacing, additional protocols concerning transfer of materials, and so on and so forth. So there's actually more to consider than one might realize until you actually start the actual planning process. But we're getting close to having that plan as a draft that we'll put forward for some more review.
Okay, the next question we have there been discussions of when we start returning to the office, if it will be incrementally with only a percentage of staff returning?
That's sort of a similar question to what we had before. And I might also add that the decision that we will make in the future about when we allow public to return to our offices for service creates a different set of requirements for returning to office than just returning workers to the office. But in both cases, there's also a lot of changes that we're currently making. We're creating shields on some counter spaces. We're creating some shields between workspaces. So there's actually some physical things that we're doing to office spaces right now that will be part of this. So the first return to works will be an examination and discussions with the administrators and supervisors about looking individually at persons who are working remotely and looking at persons who are most at risk, developing a matrix about who wishes to be considered for retaining working remotely and those who would rather work in the office space. So there'll be some individual decisions made by position depending on the inputs of the employee and the supervisor.
Okay, the next question we have, as the state lifts restrictions to working in the office, will the commission be open to some employees working from home for various reasons, and what might those reasons be?
We will be open to that possibility. And, our measure will be whether or not the functionality of the position is either retained or enhanced by the person working remotely, and whether or not there's the kind of eventual face-to-face collaboration that would be more beneficial. So again, this is going to be a decision that's made with input from the employees and the supervisors and administrators.
All right, the next question is, would the commission consider the reasons of reduction of building use, so less lights, water use, less carbon footprint, or more work output from employees and happier employees to allow those that want to work from home?
Well, I wouldn't say that we wouldn't consider effects on expenses associated with offices, but that wouldn't be the primary consideration. I think some of the other things that are mentioned in the question about the satisfaction level of the employee themselves and their productivity level and so on, potential productivity levels would be the primary things rather than the effects on building expenses.
So Jim, you had mentioned, some of the plans we're doing to protect employees as they return. We do have a question that was, what will be some of the other changes that will happen in the office as people and the public may return to our workspaces?
Well, we're looking at all of our distances currently between the workspaces that exist, and looking at what it would be like and what the ramifications would be of increasing those distances in cases where we think they should be. We're also looking, as I mentioned, at plexiglass guards, at customer service counters, in some cases floor decals, especially for when we return to public service inside the building. We may still have floor decals for lineups and so on. Social distancing is going to be with us, as I mentioned, throughout the summer in one form or another. So that's a primary consideration. We are currently looking at protective equipment such as masks and protocols for masks and so on and so forth. We're looking at break rooms and lunch rooms and whether or not it's advisable to maintain those or to, in other ways, limit how those are used. Those are just some of the things.
Will the commission consider taking people's temperatures as they enter the building for staff or the public?
We've had quite a bit of discussions about the potential for requiring masks with protocols associated with it. We really have not addressed taking temperatures. I'm not saying we wouldn't do that, but it's not at the top of our list at the present time for discussion. And we also know that that's one potential measure of risk, but there's some things about that would require a lot more discussion before we would say we'd definitely do that.
Will we require the public to wear masks when they enter our facilities?
It depends on probably what the timing is that we decide to allow public back into the buildings for public service. We do have some unique situations in our parks division, especially in major park service areas such as Mahoney State Park Lodge, Ponca State Park. In a lot of other instances, the services that we provide the public can be done remotely through the purchase of permits and so on online. And so there'll be a variety of timing, if you will, and for the kinds of services that we allow to have happen in our buildings, and it won't be universally the same all over. We've found that in most everything that we do as we react to this and as we open up new opportunities for the public in our parks and wildlife areas and so on, is that there's situations that differ across the state. We're a pretty diverse agency. We have diverse installations. They're not all built the same way. They're not all as conducive for maintaining social distancing as others are. So there may be some different protocols as we move forward, but the more consistent we can apply the protocols, the easier it is to communicate those to the staff and the public.
Will the commission require all employees to wear masks as people come back to work?
We're starting with that question as it regards our central office, and our current our draft right now has that as a requirement, but there's protocols being developed about when they would need to be worn when inside the building. But we have not addressed that question for all of our installations yet.
And that there was sort of a similar follow-up question. Will we provide a NGPC logo / fun type camo mask?
Not likely. Probably the thing that a lot of people may not understand about masks is that they're primarily a protection for someone else other than yourself when you're wearing a mask, and there's several different types of masks. And not all of the situations that we have with employees are the same. Certainly our law enforcement division has a whole unique set of circumstances with their potential interaction with the public and their different circumstances. Their mask protocol will be and is currently different than some others. There's not wide availability for certain kinds of masks. Certain kinds of masks aren't appropriate. So the question about masks is one we're delving into and have been for a while. Even cloth masks of different variety of materials only provides a certain amount of protection. So it's a complicated world. Masks are. There's a high burn rate. That's what you call it if you have to use a disposable mask, a high burn rate. And for example, if we supplied masks say the surgical masks that are sort of a combination pleated material and artificial material that's got layers, some of which are even N95 rated, meaning 95% of virus particles are caught within the mask. Those are meant to be disposable, but the burn rate would be so high on all of our park employees wearing those that we would need hundreds of thousands, depending on what time period we're looking at. So what we're doing right now is we're developing protocols for masks of different varieties, and we're ordering some of different varieties, but a lot of them are hard to get. So it's a work in progress, I guess.
Once we return to the office, will there still be in-state travel restrictions?
Well, right now, one of the entities that we're working closely with are the Nebraska regional state health directors. And we've consulted with them, for example, in our recent plan for phasing in more allowable activities in our park system. Right now, they prefer that people not travel between regional health districts, which are fairly large areas of the state. But so we will continue to work with them. Certainly, unnecessary travel is the name of the game, so to speak, at least through the end of May. But we'll adjust that as time moves forward, and any of our consultations with regional health directors says it's okay.
Could the new employee orientation week still be this year if we use masks and do proper distancing?
One of the things that we've been doing is looking at all of our scheduled activities, both internally and externally. And as we look at them, we're asking the question, how could these be accomplished and still maintain good social distancing? And one of the things that it's easy to see is that some things are more easily accomplished in maintaining social distancing and still maintaining effectiveness, and other things are not. So I would have to have a lot more discussion with the people that are usually helping do that programming for orientation. And I think that also our crystal ball isn't clear enough to know whether it would be something that could be done very late in the year. But if it's anything that would be done over these summer months, I would say we would probably delay that instead.
If the science shows that people are immune once they've had COVID-19, is it possible that NGPC will do a testing policy, even if it's not required by the state, to let people know they are immune and very unlikely they are not carrying the virus to work?
Well, the best information that I can find and is right now that it's not certain whether acquiring COVID virus and surviving it provides immunity, and if it does, for how long. So those are big question marks that are still out there. You know, anything that we would do with testing would be done, you know, through the appropriate health organizations of the state, and so it's right now it doesn't seem like it would be something that we would take upon ourselves without, you know, really strict coordination with others in the health industry and the government health industry.
Next question, how is the agency preparing for a possible second wave of the pandemic?
Well, one thing is that we're learning as we move in the current environment, right? So we've already learned a lot of things about how we can operate remotely, how we can communicate remotely. We've learned a lot of things by analyzing, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of our usual activities and determining which of those are easier to resume with social distancing and those that are not. So all the things that we're learning would actually place us in better stead for anything that would happen, say, as you described, a surge in the fall. But also, you know, everything that we're learning as a country and as a world about this virus, its effects, how to treat it, what the results are, and so on, of any kinds of potential treatment, and so all of that would come into play as we would move into another situation in the fall that could be worse, and we don't know if that's going to happen.
Given the possibility of a second wave and the vaccine, you know, being farther out, what plans or alternatives may be made for in-person deer check stations for firearm season? Will accommodations be made for employees who fear for their own health or who may have vulnerable family members?
Well, we're in discussions with administrations and discussions with Wildlife Division Administration, and we have, you know, we have the ability to telecheck under the current regulations during certain seasons. Well, we're going to look at whether or not we need to change our regulations so we could expand telechecking opportunities to other seasons and critters if we need to. But there are some of our check stations that, for example, elk, that are, you know, usually individual animals, individual hunter at a time by appointment situations that, you know, conceivably could be done with some protocols in place. And then there's other cases where, the checking is, there's not one of our employees on site, it's a gas station or whatever. We're going to start working with them to take their read on what they would like to see happen should things not improve. And we will adapt in a safe manner like we're doing for everything else.
So the last part of that was, would we make accommodations for employees who fear for their own health or who may have vulnerable family members if we have Deer Check?
Well, the answer to the question, whether it's Deer Check or whether it's any other activity that concerns that employees might have about their own health or vulnerable close relatives, is that we will do everything we can to accommodate the needs and desires and opportunities for working in ways that don't cause them great concern.
Follow up, another question kind of regarding the possible second wave. The second wave, it's possible a second wave of the pandemic will hit this fall and could affect big game seasons. What's our agency plan for addressing potential cancellation of seasons, either in advance or when the season begins? They think the question ends with, I think a lot of hunters may want to know who are planning on their trips for the fall, as the draw applications will start pretty soon.
Well, right now, I think we don't have enough information to predict necessarily a fall resurgence that would cause us to change our plans for big game season. So so we will take applications and so on as normal. But instead, what we're doing is we have learned from the experience that we had with suspending the sale of non-resident turkey hunting licenses. We learned a lot from that experience regarding what we need to do to change the status quo as it regards to selling permits and canceling seasons, et cetera, et cetera. So to be well prepared, we're looking at what our current statutes say. In the case of non-resident turkey hunting, we had to have a pass from the current statute as accomplished by a governor's directive. In other cases, we have regulations that we have to change or suspend, which in some cases might be done by a governor's declaration, or in other cases we may call emergency meetings of the commission and change some regulations. So we learned a lot from earlier experiences, and we'll be prepared to do whatever is necessary.
All right. When will overnight camping be allowed again?
Well, I think most people may have seen our most recent decision in the news, which is that we are allowing overnight camping in the park system with recreational vehicles, self-contained recreational vehicles by reservation only. Now, that does not include a lot of other kinds of camping that usually occurs, camping on first come, first serve, tent camping, and so on. We're going to phase in camping of different kinds for a variety of reasons. One reason is that right now we don't have modern restrooms open, but we have some vault toilets open. We don't have shower houses open. Those present their own difficulties in keeping them clean and virus-free, if you will. The self-contained RVs do not depend upon that infrastructure. The other thing is, by reservation only, we can increase or decrease the number of participants. On the increasing side, we have some spots, for example, that currently have been first come, first served that we can turn into reservation only. We have some other spots that if they're distance enough from each other, we can add them to our reservation system that aren't in there right now. But also, you know, if we actually had to try to do some traceback activities for any kind of a COVID-related situation, we would be able to contact people that have reservations. There's a lot of reasons why we're starting in that way, but we're hopeful that we can expand that over time. So we're developing protocols that we'd need for that.
Will the cabins be opened as soon as the state says the commission can do so?
Well, first off, the premise of the question needs a little bit of attention. The state currently is not preventing us from having cabins open for reservation. Most of the decisions that we make in our park system are made by our commission, but we do it in conjunction with the existing governor directives and health directives. There isn't anything specifically right now that's in those that is keeping us from potentially opening up some cabins. What our current concern about that is that we're essentially a hotel service when it comes to having rooms in the lodge at Mahoney or cabins for rent. And the hotel industry itself is struggling a little bit with how to properly clean hotel rooms and so on and so forth. And we're waiting for a little more direction on the very best protocol for keeping those places COVID-free if we start renting them out to people. There are some things that we might do. For example, only renting out half of our spaces and maintaining at least a week's time period in between rentals of a unit. That in conjunction with the right kind of deep cleaning might be sufficient to keep COVID spread from happening through that venue. But so we're working on that. But we don't have a date certain, and the date will depend on when we know we're secure in our belief that our protocols would be sufficient to protect not only the health of the public that would be renting those, but also our house cleaning staff.
Next question. We understand that most efforts are focused primarily on when Game and Parks programs and events will resume, but has there been any discussion of when outside organization or groups might be allowed to plan events within our park system? Examples: weddings, graduations, bike events, birthday parties.
Well, the discussions that we've had so far revolve around the very broad and basic health directives. For example, we're currently working within the 10-person limit, and we're working within the social distancing guidelines. We're doing that for those activities that we sponsor, but I think that we'll need to be cognizant of all of the current health directives that exist and would be overriding whether we sponsor the event or someone else sponsors the event. I think if it's in our facility, then we have a unique responsibility.
I have a couple of more specific questions here that we'll get to on the Q&A if we can. I think I'd like to open up right now to some of the questions. I see that Rick Holland has his hand up, although I cannot open up his microphone or his video. Can somebody else do that?
Tim, I do not have my hand up for whatever reason. I don't know why it's up.
Okay. All right. Well, that takes that one out. Let's see. I have a question in chat. from DeVarcy. DeVarcy, can you open up your sound and ask your question?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Hi. Hello, Mr. McCoy. One of the questions was answered by Tim earlier about the mask. Well, my other question is, when we do come back to the office, will Game and Parks provide hand sanitizer station, Clorox wipes, or, disinfectant spray with paper towels if people want to, clean their desk, or if they're going to a meeting or a conference room and they want to clean the chair or clean the table before they sit down?
The answer is yes. We'll have those materials readily available. Currently, we also have our, we have some people working in the office, now, and we currently have our maintenance staff doing constant rotation of cleaning of surfaces that people touch, elevator buttons, and so on and so forth, light switches. A lot of in those places where there are some people currently working in the office, they're currently doing the routine sanitizing of counter surfaces, other surfaces that people touch, and so on. But we'll continue to provide the materials that are necessary for that. You might want to know too that it would take some time, but this has caused us to start looking at touchless light switches and touchless faucets and some of those other things that some of the things that we might do might not be done real quickly, but it might put us in a better position in the future as far as the touchless appliances go and so on and so forth.
And one other question I had is, for the full-time employees coming back, will there be, if they cannot work remotely all the time due to some responsibilities within their job requirements, will there be half time allowed where certain days when they are meetings that they need to be present for, or a certain project requires face-to-face meeting, that they will be allowed to work in the office during that time and then the rest of the time work from home? That's
certainly something that can be considered and allowed on a case-by-case basis. We have right now some of the people that are working in the Lincoln office are not working there every day. Where the budget and fiscal division is rotating some people in. Administration is rotating some people in. So if it makes sense to continue that or to expand, with other people that are coming back to do that, and our functionality is, still good, then that'd be something that, yes, we would consider.
Those are all my questions. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I see Sarah Nevison has a question. Can you open your microphone, Sarah?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I was wondering if there are restrictions or recommendations on personal travel at this time. If we were to travel out of state, are we then required to quarantine when we come back? Things like that.
The governor's recommendation is that people are returning to, and I think that extends through May. Tim can correct me if he knows differently, but I believe that extends through May. And the governor's recommendation is that if you travel out of the state and come back in, that you self-quarantine for 14 days. It's not a enforceable law, but it is a health recommendation.
And let's see. I have a question from Teresa Lombard regarding tent camping.
Sorry, it took me a minute to figure out how to unmute. Yes, thank you very much. I'm just curious, and maybe it was covered and I didn't catch it, but it seems like we must have a different perspective on tent camping than on RVs, and I was just hoping someone could explain that a little bit.
Sure. The part of the consideration on what how we invite people into our parks for more than day use at sort of the participation rate that we have right now. Part of the consideration is, can we provide safe facilities that they need to use when they're there? And for example, we have our playgrounds closed off because we can't sanitize the surfaces often enough to ensure that we're providing safe facilities for that activity. Well, a lot of the facilities that people use at parks are restrooms and, in the case of campers, shower houses. So we have some vault toilets open that we can regularly go in and spray down and try to help keep those sanitary. A lot of our modern restrooms are harder to maintain in that way, so we have not developed sufficient protocol or sufficient temporary employees yet hired to maintain all of those facilities. The shower houses are in the same venue or same vein that they're hard to maintain. So the self-contained campers don't rely on those facilities. So they're not going to put pressure on that right now. As we maybe get better protocols and abilities and capabilities in place to maintain those other facilities, then we can expand it to campers who need to use those kinds of facilities.
Randy Sethheit, you had a question about our facility cleaning.
Yep. My question is, once we start allowing more of our staff and public back into our facilities, of course, I work out of central headquarters, so I'm thinking especially of the central headquarters, but our parks offices and our district offices, et cetera, will there be an effort undertaken to do, I won't call it a deep cleaning, but do a more thorough cleaning and sanitizing of surfaces in those facilities where the public has possibly touched surfaces along with staff touching those surfaces? I know Jim has answered that a little bit where he's talking about using Clorox wipes and stuff, but once we get more traffic going through these facilities, it's going to be harder to keep those surfaces clean and sanitized unless there's a specific effort directed at that effort. And so I'm wondering if the agency has considered this and what steps we may be looking at doing to clean and sanitize our facilities.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Early on, as we started to react to the health situation, we started having maintenance deep clean the whole building every Sunday night. And it's my presumption that that's still happening. I believe Tim can let me know if it's not, but I'm pretty sure it is. And but what we might need to do, Randy, is do that deep clean more often once we would start letting more employees and the public in. And again, I think there's a big difference between letting some more employees back gradually than letting the public in. And as it concerns the central office, we have not had a lot of complaints about the inability of the public to use our central office. Sort of interesting. It's probably going to be an easier time to delay public entrance into our main building than it is to perhaps some of the park entryways and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. We do have maintenance actually they're doing a daily morning cleaning also of all touch surfaces in the building. And they're doing some additional of that later when they go through and clean restrooms. But So there have been some protocols we've already put in place here, Randy. I have a hand up for a Rick. We think it might be Rick Brandt. Rick, did you have something you wanted to say?
Nope, I was just playing when I first started and got on here.
All right. Thanks, Rick.
Hi, Rick.
Let's see. I've got another question here by Ann DeFries. Ann, do you want to ask your question?
I think I typed it in the chat and it was answered.
Okay. Yeah, it was a question about reservation and tent spots.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks.
I have a couple of other preset questions at this point. I don't have any more that I can see in the queue. I'm checking for hands. We have 152 participants, so that's a pretty good group. This is a very specific question. Should I, as the American Fisheries Society president, continue planning the February 2021 tri-state meeting with Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas that we would be hosting in Nebraska City?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I think that's a question that I don't know how much lead time you need to actually decide whether you're going to do that or not do that. But we don't have enough clarity in our crystal ball, I don't think, for me to be able to give you a definitive answer. And it's certainly probably one that you're going to have to discuss with the other people who are the primary organizers and represent the participants. But I really don't know.
All right, I have one more loaded question. This is a long one. I'm going to shorten it up. With many people working from home, I've heard from some that they are overwhelmed with work and others who are struggling to find items to work on. A suggestion would be to set up an exchange site on our intranet where people could share work items that need to be done and other people could respond if they were willing to help. Sort of a question of how we might do that. What other considerations would need to be put into place?
Well, the first thing I would say is that, you know, for those of you that feel like you've got more work than you ever had before, then I can empathize with that. And part of it is, I think that although some things are done more efficiently, as we mentioned early on in this, through, you know, Zoom and teleconferencing and telephoning and so on, and email and fax, all the other digital ways that we communicate, some things aren't done as efficiently, right? And so some things take a lot more time to get done. Also, if you're working from home, at least if you have some of the same experiences that I have, because I've done a lot of working from home, is that you also sometimes get interrupted, you know, and in ways that you didn't expect, and you have other things to attend to, maybe children, maybe pets. So it can seem overwhelming, and in other cases, you know, have individual situations that are different, and maybe the nature of your job is such that you feel like you can't do all the things you did in your job remotely, and so you have less to do. And I would suggest that anyone that has either more than they think they can handle to do or less than they're able to do, to first contact your supervisor. And, you know, for those of you that have less to do than you're able to do, this is also a really good time to take advantage of training online. And we, as an agency, subscribe to every one of the online training opportunities that exist in the state. And if you contact Angie Craig, she'll help you with that. So that's one consideration. Now, as far as your actual idea about where to exchange, I think that's got some merit to explore more. And maybe you can talk also to Angie about that and your idea and your notion and concept of that. That might have some merit.
And then I've got a question from Valerie in budget. Valerie, can you get on and ask your question?
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. Didn't know if I was on. My question is there's concerns out there that I've heard from other states about individuals suing businesses for contracting the coronavirus. And, I mean, these lawsuits are, like, blowing up big time. Are we going to have any kind of disclaimer to protect ourselves?
I'm sorry, Valerie, but I'm not sure I caught that question exactly. Could you repeat that? The first part of it especially, I didn't understand.
Okay. In other states, there's, like, businesses that are running that have been going, and people have contracted the coronavirus while they were in these establishments. And so these people are suing these establishments because they contracted the coronavirus there, saying that they didn't take any precautions to protect the public. So are we going to have any kind of disclaimer? Because that's apparently one of the things that a lot of these businesses are doing is setting up disclaimers to protect themselves.
Well, obviously, the first thing we need to do is to make sure that we're doing everything that we can that's according to the best, CDC guidelines and other guidelines that exist to protect our employees in the first place. As far as liability goes, there's some different liability statutes associated with government than there is with private business, and so that'd be a question that we'd need to pose to our Associate Attorney General that's embedded in our office to start with, and then maybe someone else beyond that. But some of the businesses are sort of opening reluctantly, if you will, but for economic reasons, and there's probably also a greater amount of discrepancy, if you will, on what's safe and what isn't safe. And certainly there's some businesses and operations like meatpacking plants and so on that have their own unique challenges about distancing. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all when it comes to what you need to do to protect your employees, but we're going to try to do the best we can according to guidelines. As far as disclaimers, that's more of a legal question I don't have the answer to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think we have, since we started late, there's one question remaining in the queue. Eric Zach, you want to ask your question?
Sure. Hey, Jim and Tim. Just wondered if you could talk, at all about impacts to budgets. I think that's probably on a lot of people's mind, and so just wanted to see if you had any thoughts.
Sure. So just sort of as a backdrop, of course, we're an interesting state agency from a financial standpoint because we're funded only 13% in total for our agency by general funds, and the majority of those go to the Parks Division, but some go to law enforcement and to a little bit to wildlife for non-game endangered species work, et cetera. So we generate our own income, so to speak, for the most part from sale of permits and paying for activities. We also operate out of what's called, mostly then operate out of what are called cash funds, which are the big categories of where our revenues are deposited and where they're taken from. So, for example, for fisheries activities, wildlife activities, those revenues that are associated with those activities and permit sales go into the game cash fund. Activities that are financed primarily, through parks, whether it's park entry permits or camping fees and so on, go into the park cash fund. Then we have habitat stamps that go into a habitat cash fund. Now we have some other funds and other cash funds, but I'll just dwell briefly on the impact so far on those main funding sources. First off, I'll let you know that we try to carry a 3 to 6 month cash reserve in all of those funds that I mentioned. And it serves us well in times like these where our revenue streams are more uncertain or declining. So we've maintained the kinds of balances in those cash funds over the last several years that we've wanted to. On the game cash fund side, there's some bad news and some good news, I guess. The bad news is that we lost several $100,000, maybe approaching $1 million, for suspending the sale of non-resident turkey permits. But it's hard to say exactly, quote, how much we lost from that suspension, because some of our usual non-resident hunters were not going to come anyway. But it's also, on the game cash side, there's some good news, and that is there's more people buying fishing permits this year than last year, and than there has been for 2 or 3 years. So there's some increased revenues there. On the habitat cash side, back to the game cash fund. So it's down some, but it's not at a level down that we can't manage through. On the habitat cash side, it's down some because of lost habitat stamp sales to non-resident turkey hunters, but not at a level that we can't manage through. On the park cash side, that's probably the cash fund that's certainly the cash fund that's taken the biggest hit, because we get a lot of revenue stream from the rental of lodging, from cabins and lodges at Mahoney, for example, lodge rooms at Mahoney, also from camping fees. So we're because we've suspended those activities until recently, we're a couple $1 million down, but the RV camping is a high revenue stream activity. At full capacity for the available number of sites that we have that are reservable, we would make $500,000 to $700,000 a week off of that camping. So we have good cash balance, so we have reason to believe that we'll probably be able to manage through that. We're taking some steps with regard to the Parks Division and capital construction, trying to take a hard look at what we're doing there and maybe changing the funding source that we're using for capital construction and maintenance, so that we preserve our cash fund in parks and there's some other funds that we can potentially use. So we're keeping a close eye on that. We're in the year where we develop our biennial budget request, and we have to submit that to the legislature in early September. Actually, we need to have it done in August. So it's not likely that we're going to be able to ask for a lot of increased spending authority in any arena of our agency. But I do think that right now. We're not looking at any great reductions right now.
All right. Well, I think we will wrap up. And I appreciate everybody's participation. I hope we were able to answer most of your questions. If you have an additional question, you can still email those to Sherry. The other thing I'll let everybody know is we are going to have an evaluation that we're going to send out to staff to get more feedback about this sort of webinar, and what your thoughts are and what you liked and what you didn't like. And I'll leave it with thank you for everything that you are all doing. That is, it's pretty impressive what we're getting done, and I just want to thank you all for all the work that you're all doing. It's a pretty impressive agency.
Thank you.